Hello everyone, welcome back to another Spanish lesson with Gringa Spanish. I am Christy and today will be a grammar lesson. This has been a long time coming. Today we are going to talk about the past tense in Spanish. So you already know the present tense, you already know a lot of your irregular verbs, and you already know about the subjunctive tense, which is a little bit advanced. If you don't know what that is, you should actually probably learn the preterite first. But I wanted to put some subjunctive videos out there because I think it's something in Spanish that a lot of Spanish learners don't know that they're missing until they come across it, and they're just like, what is this? I think there's a lot of materials out there on the preterite, but not as much on the subjunctive. So, anyways, today we will fill that gap. We will talk about the preterite. So let's get into it. So in the Spanish, there are two types of past tense that you need to know about, and there are in English as well. Today we will be talking about the preterite, but I want you to know both types so that you know when to use the preterite. So the preterite describes an action that took place in the past at a definite time. It happened once. You're talking about the one time that you did it or the specific time. If you use the preterite tense, you are talking about a specific time that somebody did something. The other type of past tense is the imperfect tense. The imperfect tense is for actions that were habitual or continuous. So if you're saying, I used to do something all the time, that's the imperfect tense. You also use the imperfect tense to quote unquote set the scene. So what does that mean? The same as in English, you could use the preterite tense or the imperfect tense to describe the exact same action depending on how you want to phrase it. So if I'm talking to a detective and he says, how did you get to school that day? I would say, I walked to school that day. However, if he says, what happened when you got to this street? I might say, I was walking when this happened. So in English, when I say I was walking, that's the equivalent of the imperfect tense. I'm using it to set the scene. It is the action that was continuously happening when something else interrupted it. That's what I mean by setting the scene. So remember the story about the detective that I just told you. The preterite and the imperfect can both be used to describe the exact same action that you did or that somebody else did, depending on how you're phrasing it. So the detective asked me how I got to school that day. I say I walked to school that day. That's the preterite tense. I'm saying I did something once, a specific time. I am referring to that specific time that I did it. The imperfect tense would be if the detective said, how did you used to get to school? And I say I used to walk to school. So that's the imperfect tense. The imperfect tense would also be if the detective said, what happened while you were walking to school? And I'm talking about the exact same day that he asked me about when I use the preterite tense. But instead of saying I walked to school, I say I was walking to school when this happened. That would also be the imperfect tense. They have different conjugations in Spanish. It's pretty easy. Don't worry about it. I think once you learn it and you hear it a few times and you know what it is, and you see it in action, it'll become pretty instinctual to you. So don't be overwhelmed. So today, we're talking about the preterite. Let's get going. So for AR verbs, I have the present tense over here, the preterite tense over here, and we're going to start with caminar, a regular verb. Also, just in case, disclaimer, we are talking about regular verbs today. Regular verbs follow the rules. Irregular verbs, I will do a separate video on common preterite irregular verbs. Today we're talking about regular verbs. Most of the verbs will follow these rules, okay? So AR verbs, we have caminar, that means to walk. The present tense that you already know, the AR changes for all of the different endings depending on who's doing the caminar, okay? Yo camino, tú caminas, él camina, nosotros caminamos. Vosotros camináis. Ellos caminan. Okay? The preterite, the ending changes. Yo camine. Yo caminé. Tú caminaste. I'm sorry, guys. There is an accent on that E. That is my fault. It is yo caminé. Okay? The accent is on the E. Tú caminaste. Él caminó. Nosotros caminamos. Vosotros caminasteis. Ellos caminaron. Okay? So, the yo, instead of getting an O at the end, it gets an E with an accent. Tu, AS becomes aste. L, instead of an A, you get an O with an accent. So you start to see how important accents are in Spanish. This is spelled the exact same as yo camino, but it's not. When there's an accent on the end, el camino, the accent is pronounced, it's pretty obvious. In songs, sometimes it can be a little ambiguous depending on the person who's talking, depending on the music, depending on how the music is accented. But, I'm gonna tell you it's pretty obvious. Like, this is spelled the same. You might be like, how am I gonna tell the difference? But when you hear camino and camino, you're gonna know the difference, okay? I wanted to draw your attention to that. Nosotros caminamos. So this is the only conjugation out of all of these that is the same in the present tense and the preterite tense. Is the preterite for AR verbs for nosotros. That is the exact same. Notice, it's amos, it stays amos. So how do you know if somebody's talking about the present tense or the preterite tense when they use this form? You might have to look for context clues, to be honest with you. But it should be obvious from context clues. And if it's not, then you can ask. I mean, that happens in English too, or probably any language. Vosotros camináis. Preterite would be caminasteis. And ellos caminan becomes caminaron. Okay? Another interesting tidbit is that sometimes people from certain countries will add an S to the tu version, and that's probably just because the vast majority of conjugations for tu always have an S at the end. So people just starting adding an S at the end of this one, but it makes it pretty similar to the vosotros version. Most people say it without the S, and it is proper without the S. So just know the preterite tense, tu, does not have an S at the end. Okay, so let's get some repetition in. So AR, preterite, regular verbs. Let's look at a couple different ones. Amar means to love. Yo amé. Tu amaste. Él amó. Nosotros amamos. Vosotros amasteis. Ellos amaron. Hablar means to talk. Yo hablé. I talked. Tu hablaste. You talked. Él habló. He talked. Nosotros hablamos. We talked. Vosotros hablasteis. You all talked. Ellos hablaron. They talked. Limpiar means to clean. Yo limpié. Tú limpiaste. Él limpió. Nosotros limpiamos. Vosotros limpiasteis. Ellos limpiaron. So, just let's look at the AR endings by themselves. Yo becomes the AR will become an E. Tu, the AR will become an aste. El, the AR will become an O with an accent. Nosotros stays the same as the present tense form. AR becomes amos. Vosotros, AR becomes asteis. And for ellos, AR becomes aron. Also, guys, I wanted, just in case you guys haven't learned that much Spanish, the el form is the same for usted and ella. El means him. It's the same as usted, which is formal when you're speaking to tú. And ellos is the same as ustedes. Ellos means them. Ustedes means you all. You should know that by now, and I kind of assume that you do. But just in case you don't, I just wanted to say that. I might assume that in videos from now on, so know that. Now I have good news for you. ER, IR verbs have the same preterite endings. So that's only two things that you have to learn. So remember, AR verbs have their own endings. ER, IR verbs have both the same preterite ending. So for this example, we're going to learn these endings using the word aprender, which means to learn. So remember, the present tense for ER endings would be yo aprendo, tú aprendes, él aprende, nosotros aprendemos, vosotros aprendéis, ellos aprenden. So what does the preterite look like? Yo aprendí, tú aprendiste, él aprendió, nosotros aprendimos, vosotros aprendisteis, ellos aprendieron. So these sound really weird the first time you hear them, but honestly, the preterite gets used so often that this is going to become second nature to you very easily. You just have to keep exposing yourself to Spanish, learning yourself. I am really, really glad that you are listening to this grammar lesson because it would be very confusing for you to just hear or see this word somewhere and be like, that reminds me of aprender, but like, what is the rest of this word? I don't understand. But now that you're here learning this grammar, when you hear aprendieron, you're going to say, oh yeah, that's the preterite tense. And that exposure is now going to help you remember that over and over again much faster than if you were also just seeing this word not knowing what the heck it was. All right, let's get some repetition in for the ER-IR preterite regular verbs. Comer, yo comí, tú comiste, él comió, nosotros comimos, vosotros comisteis, ellos comieron. Vivir, that means to live. Yo viví, tú viviste, él vivió, nosotros vivimos, nosotros vivisteis, ellos vivieron. Subir, that means to climb or to get on top of something. Like you could say, if you were to say like get on top of the couch, you would use subir. Or like get on top of the horse, you would use subir. You could also use it to say this song was rising in the charts. You would use subir. Yo subí, tú subiste, él subió, nosotros subimos, vosotros subisteis, ellos subieron. So let's look at the ER-IR endings one more time. For yo, the ER or IR ending will become an I with an accent. For tú, the ER-IR ending becomes iste. For él, it becomes io with an accent over the O. For nosotros, it becomes imos. For vosotros, it becomes isteis. For ellos, it becomes ieron. And I just wanted to point out that for nosotros, remember, AR verbs had the same ending. For ER-IR verbs, that is no longer the case. The present tense and the preterite are different in the end. Okay, one more time, I wanted to go over the endings so you can now see the AR endings and the ER-IR endings next to each other to compare them. So for yo, AR will become an E, ER-IR becomes an I with an accent. For tú, AR becomes aste, ER-IR becomes iste. For él, AR just becomes an O with an accent. For ER-IR, it becomes an I-O with an accent. The O is still the one with the accent, though. For nosotros, AR becomes amos. For ER-IR, it becomes imos. For vosotros, AR becomes asteis. For ER-IR, it becomes isteis. No accents. For ellos, AR becomes aron. ER-IR becomes ieron. It has an E and an I in it, if that helps you remember. All right, now we're just going to go over a couple ejemplos. Look, we're learning Spanish. Ejemplo means example. So these are sentence examples. All right, number 1. Ayer yo comí un helado. Yesterday yo comí, we know that verb, I ate. Yesterday I ate un helado, an ice cream. Ayer means yesterday. 2. Ese día caminé a la escuela. That day I walked to school. 3. Ayer estudiaron español sin mí. So estudiar means to study. Estudiaron means they studied. Ayer, yesterday, they studied Spanish, español, sin mí, without me. 4. Comiste helado sin mí. Comiste means you ate. So comiste helado sin mí. You ate ice cream without me. 5. Hablaste con la maestra. Hablar means to speak. Hablaste means you spoke. Con means with. La maestra, the teacher. Hablaste con la maestra. You spoke with the teacher. Okay, guys. So that's all for today. I hope that was a nice little introduction to the preterite tense. Keep practicing. Go to conjugation.org if you want to see some of your verbs that you may use often to see if they're regular in the preterite tense, and if so, review those endings. The more that you just do this type of thing where you look over the endings over and over again and you read your common verbs with the preterite endings, the more it's going to stick in your head. So good job, everybody. If you made it this far, please like and subscribe if this helped you. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Did I make any mistakes? Let me know in the comments. And I'll see you guys next time.